The bell above the diner door jingled every time someone walked in, but most days, nobody important ever did. I'd been working the late shift at Rosie's diner for 6 months when it happened. 6 months of refilling coffee, wiping down chipped countertops, and smiling at strangers who rarely looked me in the eye. 6 months since I'd quietly left my grandfather's estate and the life everyone assumed I'd inherit. Most of the regulars didn't know who I was. To them, I was just Ethan, the quiet waiter with decent manners and a habit of scribbling in a small notebook during breaks. What they didn't know was that my last name was Harrington. And in certain circles, the kind that read about billion-dollar mergers in the business section, that name mattered. My grandfather, William Harrington, had built one of the largest logistics empires in the country from nothing. Cargo ships, private ports, distribution centers spanning 3 continents. By the time I was born, the Harrington name was stamped on half the freight containers crossing the Pacific. People assumed I'd grow up polished, entitled, ready to take over the empire. They weren't wrong about the expectation. They were wrong about me. Why I left. I wasn't cut out for boardrooms. At least that's what I told myself. The truth was more complicated. I'd spent my childhood in a mansion that felt more like a museum, marble floors, echoing hallways, conversations that always revolved around legacy and strategy. My grandfather believed in strength, in dominance, in winning. He loved me, I think. But he loved the idea of me even more, the future CEO, the heir, the continuation of everything he'd built. When I turned 22 and told him I wanted to carve my own path, no Harrington connections, no trust fund safety net, he stared at me across his mahogany desk for a very long time. "You'll come back," he'd said finally, not angry, just certain. "The world isn't kind to men who walk away from power." Maybe he was right. But I needed to know who I was without it. So I left. No announcements, no dramatic fight. Just a duffel bag, a small apartment in a different city, and a decision not to touch a single dollar tied to the Harrington fortune. Rosie's diner wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent, and in the quiet hours between customers I worked on something else, my resume. A resume without the Harrington name. I used my middle name instead, Ethan Cole. I listed internships I'd gotten on my own, freelance projects, certifications I'd earned quietly at night. I sent applications to startups, mid-sized firms, anywhere that would judge me by my skills and not my bloodline. Most never responded. Some rejected me. In one afternoon, I printed a fresh copy at the diner's old office printer after my manager said I could use it. That piece of paper would change everything. The day he walked in. It was a Thursday evening. Rain streaked down the windows, turning the neon open sign into a blurry pink halo. The dinner rush had slowed when the bell jingled. I didn't look up right away. "Sit anywhere," I called automatically. Then the room went quiet. Not silent but different. Like the air had shifted. I glanced toward the door. An older man in a tailored navy coat stood just inside, raindrops clinging to the fabric. Silver hair combed neatly back, posture straight, eyes sharp and observant. Even after 6 months, I recognized him instantly. My grandfather, William Harrington. He looked exactly the same, controlled, commanding, out of place in a diner with cracked vinyl booths. Our eyes met. His didn't widen, didn't soften. They assessed. He walked slowly toward the counter, removed his gloves and sat down. I swallowed and grabbed a coffee pot. "Coffee?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Yes," he said, "black." "Of course." I poured carefully, aware of every small movement. "You've lost weight," he noted. "You found me," I replied. A faint flicker of something, amusement, crossed his face. "I didn't come looking for you." My chest tightened. "What?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. My resume. The version I'd printed that afternoon. "I stopped here because my car service took a wrong exit in the rain," he said calmly. "I ordered coffee, and when I reached for a napkin, this was tucked beneath the dispenser. I must have left it there while clearing the table." He unfolded it carefully and laid it between us. "My grandson," he said quietly, "is applying for entry-level analyst positions under the name Ethan Cole." Heat rushed to my face. I didn't want to use the Harrington name, he finished. He studied me for a long moment. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not the public relations smile he used at press conferences. A small, genuine one. You removed every advantage, he said. No mention of family, no recommendations from our board, not even your internship at our Singapore office. I earned that internship, I said defensively. Yes, he replied, you did, but you omitted it anyway. The diner door opened again, letting in a gust of cold air, but neither of us moved. Finally, he folded the resume once more and slipped it back into his coat. I have a flight to catch, he said, standing. To where? I asked. He met my gaze. Home. And then he walked out into the rain. That night, I didn't sleep. Part of me feared he'd send someone to drag me back, or worse, that he'd interfere with my job applications out of spite. But the next morning, nothing happened. No calls. No messages. 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. This is Ethan. Mr. Cole, a woman's voice said briskly. I'm calling from Northbridge Capital regarding your application. We'd like to schedule a final round interview. Northbridge Capital was one of the firms I'd dreamed about working for. Yes, I stammered, absolutely. The interview was set for Monday morning. The surprise. When I walked into Northbridge's glass tower downtown, my palms were sweating. The lobby gleamed with polished stone and quiet efficiency. I gave my name at reception and was escorted to the executive floor. Executive floor. That must be a mistake, I whispered to the assistant. No mistake, she said pleasantly. The boardroom doors opened. And there he was. My grandfather sat at the far end of the long table. But he wasn't alone. 3 other executives sat beside him. A banner on the wall read, Northbridge Capital Strategic Acquisition Meeting. I froze. My grandfather leaned back in his chair. Good morning, Ethan. I looked around. What is this? One of the executives cleared his throat. Mr. Harrington finalized a controlling investment in Northbridge on Friday night. Friday night. The same night he'd walked out of the diner. My heart pounded. You bought the company. Not for you, he said evenly. For us, it was a strategic move I've been considering for months. He gestured to the chair across from him. Zit. I didn't move. If this is about forcing me back into the family business. It isn't, he interrupted sharply. Silence filled the room. Then his voice softened. You wanted to be judged on merit, so today you will be. He nodded to one of the executives. Proceed. For the next 2 hours they grilled me. Financial modeling scenarios, risk assessments, market expansion strategies. No one mentioned my last name. No one went easy on me. By the end, my shirt clung to my back with sweat. Finally, my grandfather spoke. Step outside. I did. 10 minutes later, the assistant called me back in. My grandfather stood. Northbridge is launching a new independent venture arm, he said, focused on small, overlooked businesses with growth potential. He slid a folder across the table. We're offering you a position as junior analyst, reporting to the board, 6-month probation, no special treatment. I stared at the folder. You're serious? Yes. Why? His gaze held mine. Because you walked away from billions to prove you could stand on your own, he paused. I needed to see that. Emotion tightened my throat. You flew in that night, I said slowly. You bought the company. He shook his head slightly. I flew in to make sure the world didn't crush you before it had the chance to see what you're worth. 6 months later. I worked harder than I ever had. First one in, last one out. I analyzed failing diners, family-owned shops, struggling manufacturers, the kinds of businesses my grandfather once built his empire around. No one treated me like royalty. Sometimes they forgot who I was entirely. And I loved it. At the end of the probation period, I was called into the boardroom again. This time there was no interrogation. Just my grandfather. You've exceeded expectations, he said simply. I exhaled. Does that mean I stay? He gave a rare proud nod. It means you've earned your name. I frowned. He placed something on the table. A new business card. Ethan Harrington, investment analyst. I picked it up slowly. You don't have to use it, he said, but it's yours. For the first time I understood. He hadn't flown in to drag me home. He'd flown in to meet me where I was. And maybe, just maybe, to let me build something that was finally my own. The bell above the diner door still jingles when I visit Rosie. But now, when I sit at the counter and order black coffee, I don't feel like a runaway heir. I feel like a man who chose his path and proved he could walk it. And somewhere across the city skyline, my grandfather watches, not to control my future, but to see what I build next.